Welcome to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I'm joined today by Aaron Burnett. He is with WheelHouse Digital Marketing Group. So Aaron, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So talk to me a little bit about WheelHouse. What's in your wheelhouse? What do you guys do?
That's part of the conceit of the name.
Yeah.
It's part of its genesis. Yeah. So we are a data-driven performance marketing agency. We were founded 12 and a half years ago here in Seattle. We work with all sorts of clients, but they're sort of unified by a couple of characteristics. Everybody's trying to achieve a transactional outcome. So it's either lead generation or an e-commerce transaction. There are a couple of notable exceptions. We've worked with NASA for the last 5 years, and there's no transaction there. It's about aggregating a much larger audience so that people can see and learn from the fantastic information that they have. We're about 30 folks, nominally based in Seattle. I say nominally because, like all digital agencies, I've got people in 15 states around the country. So I just sort of technically have an office here. From a practice perspective, we're very much technology driven. In fact, we have our own intellectual property. We have a patent for some of the IP that we created, which helps us to deliver phenomenal performance. But we're digital strategy, which is content strategy and technical SEO. We're digital advertising, which is PPC and paid social and display and programmatic. And we have a marketing sciences team. And that marketing sciences team, we have our own performance marketing data warehouse that we use to derive insights that you otherwise can't glean without aggregating performance data from all of the channels that are out there, all of the advertising channels, analytics, search console, right down to client CRM data. We have a custom attribution modeling application that we've developed, and we have a web monitoring application that tells us if anything ever goes awry with any analytics element on a client site or any lead capture process or any e-commerce transaction. That's sort of us in a nutshell.
Okay, well, so talk to me about, because I'm a recovering technologist, so I ran development shops early in my career. So it sounds like there may be some technical in your background, or is that some other part? Like, how'd you get into that space before you were doing this?
Yeah, there's a bit of technical in my background, although always from the perspective of a marketer. So earlier in my career, I was a VP of sales and marketing with AT&T Wireless.
Okay.
And as part of that role, I actually created technology. So it was the idea behind some technology. I ran their product management organization for our particular division. And I've always loved and gotten benefit from the interplay of deeply understanding technology and then understanding how to leverage it to deliver value through marketing, which is what we're doing here. So we have identified needs that either our clients have or that our super smart practitioners have, and then we've sought to deliver on those needs and solve those problems with the technology that we've created.
Very nice. And so as you're sort of engaging and working with a client to begin with, like, what are some of the first pieces or things you're looking at if they call you up and say, hey, so we need some help? Where do you start with an organization?
Yeah, well, we always start with what they're trying to achieve from a business perspective. It is really typical, in fact, I would say consistent, that clients will come to us saying, we need X, we need an SEO strategy, we need a content strategy, we need digital advertising. And we always say, all right, that's great. Tell us more about what you actually want to achieve from a business perspective. And more often than not, they didn't actually need X, at least not right now. They need Y. They need something else that is a predecessor step or is of higher value to them. And so part of that initial conversation is getting really clear about what they need and how we can deliver best value regardless of what they came in the door asking, and then figuring out what to propose and how to work with them over time to deliver that value. We maintain very long-term client relationships. In fact, our average client tenure is about 5.5 years. The only way you can do that is by remaining laser focused on business value and honestly caring very little about vanity metrics, which are sort of rampant in digital marketing.
They certainly are. We work with new clients all the time who are like, how many people are going to our homepage? I'm like, I don't care. In fact, I think that's a failure. If they go to your homepage, we did something wrong, right? The content isn't driving someone to the thing they looked for. They're lost. It's like me walking in the front door of Home Depot. If I'm ever in the front part of a Home Depot, it means I don't know where I'm going, right? You got to get somebody.
Exactly.
And so we use, and I know this is a big part of your business. I talk a little bit about we use content as to get people to the thing that they care about. So as you start to think about content strategy, because that's one of the things you brought up as a kind of an initial piece you might look at for a client, what are some of the goals and ways that you approach content strategy with your customers?
Yeah, that's a great question. So again, through that lens of wanting to deliver business value, ultimately what we want to do is use content to guide people through a conversion funnel to get them to the point that they become a lead or they transact on a client site. The approach that we use is called an intent-based awareness framework. And you can really think of it as a marketing funnel applied to content strategy. So we're looking at people who are problem aware. I've got a problem. I don't know what the solutions are. Or I'm aware of the problem and the solution, or I'm aware of the problem and the solution and the brands that might offer options in this space. And now I'm aware of the brands and the specific solutions, and I'm ready to convert. You can use web data, so analytics data. You can use search results. You can use stakeholder interviews, information particularly from sales folks and sometimes from marketing folks and from clients and prospects themselves to reverse engineer the typical conversion path that is taken by someone who ultimately converts. So you can see, for example, that prospects in the main follow the following pattern. They come into a site and they read a piece of content that describes a problem and how to think about this problem. And then they go over and they look at case studies and then they leave. Then you can see that they come back and they look at about the company, who are its investors, what sort of credibility, and they read a little bit more about the solution. And then maybe they start looking at pricing information, and you can follow these journeys. You can see them, and you can also see the patterns in search results that appear for queries that correspond to these certain awareness states and user intent. And you can use all of this to reverse engineer exactly what people need in the main to become well-informed and step through a conversion journey. And by doing that, you can derive not only the types of content that you should create, you can map that content to levels of awareness. You get a really clear understanding of the architectural implications for how that content should be presented. It's insufficient to know I need to create content for these particular topics. You also need to know this should be a content hub, or this should be a pillar page, or this could actually be a landing experience where we're marching people through several different levels of awareness and getting them much closer to conversion. And so we create content strategies through that lens. And then we implement analytics on client sites that allow us to know the level of awareness and the intent of a visitor. And what that does is create a really powerful symbiosis between organic content strategy and retargeting on the digital advertising side, which is efficient and inexpensive and can be executed as a campaign as well. So if you land on a piece of content on a client site and you're problem aware, I know that. I've set a custom dimension in analytics, and I've added you to an audience of people who are problem aware. Now I can remarket to you, and I can always make sure that we're delivering the right message based on your level of awareness in the right channel at the right moment to walk you through that conversion path. And the implications of this, the benefits, the business value delivered can be pretty profound. The last time we implemented this for a large organization, in this case, it's an organization that runs a pretty large system of high-end retirement facilities. They generated 105% increase in earned move-ins and $63 for every dollar invested.
Nice.
It is extremely effective.
Very, very nice. And as we move to, looking for more justification of how those dollars are being spent, those are important things to look at. And so, I mean, you've burst the bubble of some of the marketers who are listening. They think that if they put out a social media post or an ad, they're going to have somebody like sign up and convert immediately. You're saying that's not true. Like, it takes a little bit of time.
Yeah. Well, I hate to be the heretic in the room, but yes, it takes a little time.
And I should probably justify it. It's typically not the marketers. It's the salesperson that the marketing person's working with. They're like, but they came to the website. Why did they ask for a demo? I was like, what?
Yeah.
We're not ready there yet. Yeah. Like, would you do that?
It's
like
sometimes the salespeople. It's sometimes the CFO or the CEO.
Yeah. Yeah. Because, and thinking, transactionally, if you think about the way that marketing used to work, it was about driving someone to someone else potentially to get them to convert and get them switched over. But nowadays, consumers, no matter what they're buying, are so much more sophisticated on what they research and what they look at and those types of things. So my question,
That's absolutely true.
Question for you is kind of outside the ecosystem that you own. So if you think about the tracking that you're putting in place, which feels like it works really well if I have my website and I own my digital properties, right? So like I come through and I've got a landing page or I'm doing these things. What or how do you take into account like those other influencers along that journey? So if somebody, let's say, goes to Quora and asks a question about that product or looks up something, how do we find that information along the path to know where we need to spend our time?
That's part of the analysis and the due diligence that we do as we're first establishing the strategy. So as we think about content strategy, wherever possible, we're not limiting that research, that purview just to the organic channels. We're also looking at paid channels, and we're looking at activity on other platforms that both informs what we understand about the prospect journey and also tells us about where we need to also be thinking about targeting messages to facilitate that user journey.
Okay. Got it. So yeah, so that's all done in your background and making sure you're establishing a good strategy that is encompassing who's going to visit what and when, and knowing that it's not the same journey for every single person as they go along.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And then critically making sure that we've put in place appropriate analytics so that we understand what is working as expected, what's working better than expected, what isn't working, and we can be really responsive and make adjustments based upon that.
Very nice. We're going to go to our first commercial break, and when we get back, we're going to talk a little bit about some things that impact specifically the kinds of clients you work with. So I think some regulations and things that are in play that marketers need to be aware of. So we're going to take our first break. You're listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger, and we will be back in just a minute.
The Claw podcast is brought to you by Liger. Liger is a hybrid marketing firm combining a brand strategy consultancy and a production house that offers the full range of content and creative services. We can be your entire marketing department or your entire marketing department's favorite people to work with. We save the world from boring, broken marketing by putting businesses in brand therapy so they can express their most authentic, memorable selves. And then we share their story so they can be known. For more information, visit ligerpartners.com and follow us on our social media platforms.
And we're back. You're listening to The Claw. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. The Claw is the marketing podcast for C-suite executives. I'm talking today with Aaron Burnett. He is with WheelHouse Digital Marketing Group, and we're talking about the things that are in his wheelhouse because I just can't get over the kind of dad joke.
I appreciate that.
And so knowing that one of the big categories that's in your wheelhouse is you do a lot in the medical category, yes? True?
Yeah, we have a lot of healthcare and medical device.
Okay, all right. So tell me more about what do you mean by medical device? Is it like a CPAP machine, or is this, what would be a medical device you guys might work on or think about?
So for example, a device called Omnipod, which is an automated insulin monitoring and delivery device.
So those are like little things that are on people that they put their phone up against? Yeah. Okay. So in that world, when you're working to take someone through all of the different levels of intent, educating them, awareness, whatever, there's some interesting regulations and things that I need to consider as a company. So talk to me a little bit about that. Like, let's say I'm going to bring one of those types of devices, or I'm going to do something in that category. What do I need to know before I get started to make sure that Uncle Sam doesn't show up at my door at some point?
Yeah, well, it's less Uncle Sam and it's more attorneys that you don't want to
hear from. That's such an interesting thing because that's always the case, right? Like people always worry about the government, and it's typically the class action lawsuit or the person who's like, have you been on a website and it's done the following thing, like that kind of thing. So yeah.
Yeah, okay. That's exactly right. Yeah. So the issue here is there really was a seismic event, without exaggeration, in December where the Department of Health and Human Services issued clarification and a really detailed explanation or description of what it means to be HIPAA compliant in the context of digital marketing. And they were very specific about what this means for pixels used for tracking advertising and data that would be collected by an analytics platform, and what is acceptable to collect and not collect, and then what sort of business relationships have to be in place to make that collection acceptable. So a healthcare organization can collect user data, as long as they keep it within their four walls conceptually. It remains a part of their infrastructure. It's not shared with any other third party. It's in that sharing that you can run afoul. And what this interpretation of HIPAA said very explicitly for the first time is that there's all sorts of data that previously was not considered to be PHI or private health information that now is. So, for example, the mere fact of being on a page whose URL has to do with a form of health treatment or health condition is considered PHI if in combination with anything that identifies you by location or any other aspect related to your user identity. And it's much more expansive than that. What that means by extrapolation is that virtually everything that an advertising partner might collect, in particular, a partner like Meta, whose tracking pixel is quite greedy and collects quite a lot about users, and then that what is collected is importantly combined with what Meta already knows about that user, is by definition not in compliance with HIPAA. Now, they could be in compliance if they signed a specific sort of agreement with the healthcare organization called a BAA. It's a business associate agreement. And what that agreement says is, we acknowledge we're going to share private health information and we're going to be very careful with it. We're not going to release it to anyone else. Advertising partners can't do that. Their liability is too great. They can't change their collection mechanisms for a particular healthcare organization. And the implications of this have meant that there are many very prominent healthcare organizations that already have been hit with class action lawsuits. And the reaction has been that many other healthcare organizations have just ripped tracking off of their websites. And so they've either ceased advertising or they're flying blind. And it's a real conundrum because there is no analytics platform that is in common usage that is by definition HIPAA compliant. And advertising platforms and their collection mechanisms also aren't HIPAA compliant. And so one of the things that we've been doing and talking with our clients about is implementing a very different approach to advertising tracking and analytics collection that gives full control to the data collected to the compliance team and the marketing team, is platform agnostic, and enables them to still continue their marketing. Doesn't cause them to have to fly blind. It's a fundamentally different architectural approach to analytics and advertising tracking than has been used historically or has been required historically.
Yeah, it's interesting to watch the pendulum go back and forth because so prior to this, I owned a research company. And so we did extensive research around not only, Section 508 as it relates to accessibility of the use of products and things, then also around some of the GDPR and privacy laws and HIPAA and all that. And you have consumers, if you think about it from the consumer perspective. So yes, there's the class action lawsuits and you have to be very worried about those that cost a lot of money and the lawyers get to make a lot of money. But you do have these consumer groups that want companies to know things about them because they want their life to be easier. So they look for convenience and they appreciate the fact that, now I get to see all these other options that I wouldn't have been aware of. And then there are the people who are on the other side, right? So this is this interesting balance. And then the companies have to service not only, okay, who do my consumers look like? What do they want? And then what are the regulations that the lawyers or others are going to take advantage of to prevent me from being able to do my business effectively? So it changes quite a bit trying to figure out how to work around it all.
Yeah, it really does. I think one of the things that is called into question here is whether consent, as you were just describing, is actually valid in this context, whether a user actually understands what it means to consent.
Right.
So we talked about Meta and their combination of what they learn with what they already know. Google is sort of the king of this because they'll track what you're doing on a particular website, but they'll combine it with what you've done in a logged in state in every other application and property over which they have purview as well. And so when you consent to tracking in a particular context, the question is, does that really mean you consented to the combination of that data with everything else they knew about you in the context of HIPAA specifically? Yeah. So the approach that we have taken is for our clients, we have pulled out all of the current tracking pixels and even the analytics ID, and we've created a private custom client ID that becomes the only means by which data is collected on their site. And the data collected is governed by data libraries that we develop for them. So compliance explicitly says we will collect this information, and that is in a library that we built for them. That's the only thing that is collected. And then we only share with downstream partners, so an advertising platform, analytics, even the client's own CDP, what is explicitly determined to be acceptable to share with those platforms and is required to enable advertising. So you can share very, very, very limited data with Meta or with Google Ads and still effectively run your advertising. You just don't give them all of the other data elements or data attributes that create risk.
Yeah. Okay. Very smart. Yeah. Very smart. And I've seen, doing sort of sampling, like lookalike kind of concepts of this is like this audience type without knowing that person, using some kind of varies that way. Well, very nice. So if you think about that, so that's kind of a trend that's due. What else are you thinking about or considering in the future? What do they need to be worried about 12 months from now? like
12 months from now.
Yeah. Well, we got like GA4 and all that stuff.
Exactly. Yeah, we're spending a lot of time working on GA4 and ensuring that our clients are well equipped to use GA4, and I'll put use in air quotes, to use GA4 in a context that makes sense to them from a UI perspective, and to ensure that they maintain access to their historical information as well, even after the cutover. And Universal Analytics stops collecting data June 30th. And so everyone will be forced to GA4 at that point. And you have a very limited window during which you could export and archive or warehouse that historical data. And then even after GA4 is implemented, the look back window, the data retention window is only 14 months. And so because we have a performance marketing data warehouse, we are extracting historical Universal Analytics data. We are combining it with new GA4 data for reporting continuity. And then we've overlaid, we've honestly needed to build new data visualizations that become the new UI for GA4 for our clients, so that they don't have to work in the native UI for GA4, which most people have found pretty frustrating and challenging.
No, a Google backend tool that's frustrating and confusing? I say it ain't so.
Yeah. We've even got to the point where we've been asked to and have created a data visualization that presents Universal Analytics, the historical Universal Analytics, and GA4 data side by side with tooltips that describe why this is different and how to understand the new data on a forward-looking basis.
It's what I love about marketing, because being a recovering technologist and in that space and looking at what it is, it's a very complicated practice area. So, it used to be the Don Draper, right? A good idea, a message, get people to show up to the store. Nowadays, there's so many things involved, from not just the cool creative, but all the way down to tracking, did that cool creative actually do something for us? And how do we integrate those into the backend systems? It's a very interesting time and space to be in the marketing world.
It really is. But that's one of the things that I love about digital marketing. When I ran marketing for other companies, particularly when I was at AT&T Wireless, and budgets were big and ideas were more conceptual, and a lot of the things that we did, almost everything we did was offline. It was very hard to prove definitively what business value you contributed to the company. On the other hand, in digital marketing, you did it or you did. It's right there in the data. You may have quibbles around attribution, but you can tell whether you move the needle or not. And that's exciting. And it also, it creates confidence and business momentum.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for spending time with me today. It's been great. I got a nice little lesson there in the last segment. So a good thing I wasn't aware of, because we don't really live in that category. So that will be very helpful to some people that are in that space, so that they can avoid the trip ups of the lawyers and things like that. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me. I enjoyed the conversation.
And so if people want to get information on you or your company, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Well, they can reach me on Twitter. I'm at Aaron Burnett. They can reach me at email, aaron@wheelhousedmg.com. And my website is wheelhousedmg.com.
Thank you very much. So you've been listening to The Call. I'm Eric Holtzclaw, Chief Strategist at Liger. We've been talking today with Aaron Burnett, WheelHouse DMG. He gave us some really good information on analytics and tracking and making sure we know that marketing spend is being effective, and some things that you may need to be aware of as you start to put together your marketing plans in the future. And until next time, thanks for tuning in.